and there's a Tar Heel at the forefront with Kobe White. So that, if for some reason they get back to being, NBA title good, we'll always have this little stigma that maybe it's just a Tar Heel thing in Chicago that gets you to that point. So you have that. And then you brought it up about the impact that Michael Jordan had on the game in the 90s. And I put a post up late Sunday night, and I'm a basketball junkie, so I've done a lot of reading and old, listening to stories that my dad told me, because my dad got to go see Michael Jordan play in person and go do and watch some other stuff. But I left the documentary somehow loving him more as a player and a competitor, loving the game of basketball more than I already love it, and then somehow loving the NBA even more. And I think that's whenever you talk about GOAT status or GOATness, that's where he goes into the other level, is that the impact he has on the game is still being felt. He hasn't played in almost 20 years. Kobe Bryant is not going to have the same impact, and neither is LeBron James. And so that's something that I take away from this documentary. And then one of the things, I know you were wanting to mention something about this, we always get in the debates about, who's the best coach and who's the greatest coach, whether it's in basketball, in sports. Phil Jackson has a legitimate argument. And it's not just because, he won 11 titles. No, it's the fact that he managed all those egos in 98, starting with Michael Jordan. You have Scottie Pippen, and then Dennis Rodman, who in the same year took a 48-hour vacation to go to Vegas to kind of decompress when Scottie Pippen returned from injury. And then the day before Game 4 of the finals is MIA because he's at a WWE event. Just not, but it was still able to get him to buy into a team goal and, of course, win a 6th championship. And I think, that's why whenever we talk about him being the greatest coach in the history of the NBA, it's not because the ability to or not because he won 11 titles, it's the ability to get teams and players to buy into one common goal.
Yeah, you can make the argument that he potentially is the greatest coach to ever coach in basketball history. Up there with Kay and John Wooden and Dean Smith and Greg Popovich, all those types of guys. But it's just truly amazing because we get to see Phil Jackson sort of go a little in depth about these kind of things, because at the time I feel like most people were kind of maybe thinking, he's got no choice but to play Dennis. But we kind of just learned that, no, that's just how Phil handled it. He handled guys differently, and that's why he was so successful. Most coaches, and this is where I can tie in, the Tar Heel stuff here in this conversation. If a guy missed practice the day before a tournament game, do you honestly think that they would play in that tournament game for Roy Williams?
No.
No chance. No chance. And I respect that. But I also respect the mindset that Phil Jackson had toward things, because with Dennis Rodman, he was a completely different type of guy. We have not seen anybody really in sports that is anything like him. The closest is maybe Terrell Owens, and even him, Dennis Rodman was just a guy that if you didn't let him go and do those types of things, like Phil Jackson said, he wouldn't be the same player. Or frankly, he probably would have quit. He had a different way of going about life. And, I don't know if that was because, we just don't know a whole lot about the Dennis Rodman story in depth in terms of, what was going on in his life, whether there was, drug or alcohol abuse, stuff like that. But, for him to be able to handle a guy with that big of a personality. And then you have a guy in Michael Jordan, who we all know, great player and everything, but we knew he had a big personality. And like I said, look, Michael loves him some Michael. Just that simple. He is all about himself. He's a guy that, look, he bets on himself all the time, for crying out loud. And then for Scottie Pippen, I don't feel like it's quite as out there. But when you have a guy that literally sits out a key play in a playoff series in 1994 because he's not getting the last shot, he's that angry that he just says, screw it, I'm not going out on the floor. To be able to balance all of those guys and win 6 championships, go to six NBA finals and win all of them without even going to a Game 7 is unbelievable. And then not only do you do that, you then move on, go to L.A., and have to deal with two of the biggest personalities in that decade as well. You somehow were able to keep Kobe and Shaq, content enough and, keep them from killing each other to somehow win 3 titles before they had to break that up. So in my opinion, I just don't think that there's anybody in the NBA that can make the argument now in terms of coaches that they're better than Phil Jackson. And this documentary kind of helped to show that, because through all of this, Phil Jackson still is one of the most calm humans I think I've ever seen in my entire life. If that was me, I would probably be in a mental ward after having to deal with all those different personalities and all that stress building up, because I probably would have wanted to wring some necks with the amount of guys that, the amount of personalities that he had to deal with.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing this documentary did, was it was focused mainly on Michael Jordan, but we learned so much about so many different other people that we just would have never known, or we didn't know before this. So, I'm with you. We got to find a new Sunday night activity, but it was a lot of fun. It was exciting. It was funny. It brought the sports world together for 2 hours every Sunday night. That it was a live tweeting thing, and you got the soundtrack and all the stuff that got a whole lot of reviews. It's going to be hard for any documentary moving forward to top this. And so, kudos to ESPN, kudos to Netflix. If you haven't checked it out, it will be available on Netflix starting, I think it's June or July. It'll be on there for you to watch. You can watch the unedited version where you hear all the F-bombs, or if you got little kids, you can hear them all bleeped out. So with that, we'll move on to our last topic, and we are going to conclude our season review project that we've done since the 2019 basketball season came to a close. Our final guy we're going to talk about is Armando Bacot, and this will be a very fun and interesting guy to talk about. Before Cole Anthony committed to Carolina, Bacot was the prize gem of the recruiting class up until that point. He was the prototypical big man for Roy Williams, can run the floor, can finish at the rim. We were told has a respectable mid-range jump shot. He was supposed to come in and be the best big man right away. That didn't happen, and not mainly because of him. Garrison Brooks became a player that, we never thought he'd ever be, and is arguably now the best big man in the ACC. Bacot, you look at his numbers, and it's kind of hard to complain at what he did as a freshman. He gave you 9 points and almost 8 rebounds a game. I think the thing that really stuck out with us was the lack of consistency, mainly in the ACC part of the season. But then again, you can respect that because he is a freshman. I had Brendan Marks on after the season to kind of talk about the year, and I asked him about Armando Bacot. And he's, this is when you have a reporter pointing this out, this is how you know there's deficiencies in his game. His conditioning level has got to get improving, because he mentioned he doesn't run the floor well. What does Carolina want to do better than anybody in the country? Run the floor. And it starts with their big men. You can have a point guard run, but if you don't have someone to run with you, it's not going to be effective. That's where I think the level of his game has got to go to the next level. He's got to get stronger to finish through the rim. Only 47% from the field. For a guard, not a bad number. For a big man, you want that number at least 50%. You'd love it to be in the mid-50s. And, last year when we were in the offseason, everyone told us that Leaky Black was going to be the player that was going to take the next step heading into the previous year. I think Armando Bacot will be that guy that when I have guys on to talk about the upcoming year, he'll be the guy that we expect to see take the biggest step forward heading into next season.
No, I totally agree with that. I was going to bring that up probably at the start of this conversation when we talk about, what he's going to have to do next year. But yeah, I think his freshman year is it's kind of difficult to sort of put into perspective as to where we had it, because the expectations for him were pretty high, and he didn't meet those expectations. But also, you had the injury. I mean, we cannot just discount the fact that him getting injured in the game against Ohio State and then coming out and playing in that game against Virginia. I mean, just unbelievable, because we thought, no way possible that this guy is going to come out and play in this game. And at the time, when Carolina was starting to sort of fade a little bit, you could start to see some of the writing on the wall that this team was maybe not going to be the team that we thought they were going to be. But this was at the time, there was still some hope. And we thought, okay, well, if they win this game against Virginia, a team that's struggling offensively, then we're going to have a good shot here. And for him to play in that game, it was huge. But I feel like as the year went along, we started to see the fact that ankle injury was really starting to hurt him. And, it'll be interesting to look at him, especially early on this next year, and see if maybe that was as big of a factor as we thought. I think you're right. He's got to get better at running the floor. And the thing that I think sort of points to the injury a little bit there is the fact that when he was at the high school level, that was one of the things that they said that was one of the best parts of his game, and they thought was going to translate very well over. Maybe it's not. Maybe that just hasn't really translated over, and we'll have to wait and see on that. But I think that's something where we're still the jury's kind of out on that. We're not going to say that he's really just not going to be a guy that's going to run the floor well. I think with a point guard that I think is also going to be geared towards trying to get the ball up the floor and push the tempo a little bit more than Cole Anthony was, I think that's also going to help. But I agree with you. You talk about a guy that's going to have a lot of pressure on him to step up and take that next step this year. He's probably the first guy that you look at, because not only does Carolina need him to step up and be better, you need him to be that help that we thought he could be down low along with Garrison Brooks. But also, you look behind him, and this is not a guy that can afford to really struggle, because if he does, he's probably going to get passed over on the depth chart. That's the difference between last year, where when they took him out in some of those games late in the year, and we started seeing guys like Brandon Huffman and Walker Miller coming in, we knew, okay, eventually Armando is going to have to come back in. He's got to find a way to step it up. Now it's, okay, if we put you on the bench, we may not really necessarily need to put you back in the starting lineup in the next game. We may not necessarily need to play you more than 12, 15 minutes a game if you're really struggling that bad. So there's not as much room for error, and I think that can do one of two things. That could really deject the guy, or it could motivate him. And we're going to find out which one it does for Armando Bacot. I would probably lean the more motivated side, because I still think that there are a lot of things to like about his game, and I still feel like there's a chance that he could become that guy that we thought he was going to be when we initially brought him in this class. But it's definitely one of those things where you kind of have to wait and see.
I think you brought up the biggest point, and that was what you were finishing up with. There's a lot of talent coming in the interior part of the roster that wasn't there last year. I've seen many Tar Heel fans say that he won't start right away because the talent coming in is better than he is. I disagree with that, because we know how Roy Williams is going to prefer a guy that has experience in the beginning to start, and if we get to mid-December and he's getting out played, then he'll make that decision. But I think that's really got to motivate him. Carolina needs someone to help Garrison Brooks on the interior. As great as he is, we saw this past year, he still can't just will you to an ACC title or compete for a national championship. Carolina starting out is not going to be as good on the perimeter as they will be in February and hopefully in March. That's just the nature of them being extremely young on the wing. So he's going to need a running mate. Armando Bacot has all the tools to be that guy. And I think that's what you need him to be. You need to be a guy that, you don't have to play through the offense through him, but when he gets his touches, a Deion Thompson kind of guy, makes the most of his opportunities. That's what Garrison Brooks needs as a wingman, and that's what Carolina needs as a team, and I think that's what the goal's got to be. There's not the pressure this year as there was last year for you to produce at a very high level. Coming in, we were expecting you to give us close to a double-double. We don't need that this year. It would help, but we just need you to be productive and be effective. So I think he's going to have a great summer. I think he'll get it. I think Jonas Sarachia will get his body more where it needs to be heading into the season, and I think we're going to get more the kind of player we thought we were going to get than the guy guy we kind of saw last year. And I do agree that I think the injury did hamper his growth and really his just production over the year. He was probably more hurt than we ever thought he was going to be after that Ohio State game. It shows you the kind of toughness and the kind of teammate he is that he's willing to go out there and play through some injuries. So with that, our season